Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, August 6, 2024. Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee, chooses Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to be her vice presidential running mate, calling him a battle-tested leader who has an incredible track record of getting things done for Minnesota families. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump's campaign calls Governor Walz a dangerously liberal extremist and West Coast wannabe trying to reshape Minnesota in the image of California. Pennsylvania's Secretary of the Commonwealth Al Schmidt warns of an artificial intelligence chatbot on X that has been spreading election disinformation. A rebound on Wall Street after Monday's 1,000-point drop in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Today, it closed up nearly 300 points. Tropical Storm Debby moves on from Florida to Georgia and the Carolinas with enough rain to cause catastrophic flooding. And Boeing executives testify at a public hearing of the National Transportation Safety Board about the Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9 in-flight door plug blowout earlier this year, promising that this time the commitment to safety will stick. Vice President Kamala Harris, Democratic presidential nominee, announcing on Instagram, "I am proud to announce that I've asked Governor Tim Walz, Democrat of Minnesota, to be my running mate. One of the things that stood out to me about Tim is how his convictions on fighting for middle-class families run deep. It's personal." Governor Walz then posting on X, "It's an honor of a lifetime to join Vice President Harris in this campaign. I'm all in. Vice President Harris is showing us the politics of what's possible. It reminds me a bit of the first day of school. So let's get this done, folks. Join us." And there was a link to a donation page. The Harris campaign then posted a video of her calling to make the ask.
Hi, this is Tim.
It's Kamala Harris. Good morning, Governor.
Good morning, Madam Vice President.
Listen, I want you to do this with me. Let's do this together. Would you be my running mate and let's get this thing on the road?
I would be honored, Madam Vice President.
The joy that you're bringing back to the country, the enthusiasm that's out there, it'll be a privilege to take this with you across the country.
Well, let me tell you, I have just the utmost respect for you. I have really enjoyed our work together. You understand our country. You have dedicated yourself to our country in so many different and beautiful ways. And we're going to do this. We're going to win. And we're going to unify our country and remind everyone that we are fighting for the future for everyone. So let's get out there and get this done, okay?
Let's do it. Do the work in front of us. Let's win this thing.
That's right. All right, buddy. I'll see you soon. Take care. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
Video with Vice President Harris and Governor Walz posted by the Harris campaign. Associated Press writes, in choosing the 60-year-old Walz, Vice President Harris is turning to a Midwestern governor, military veteran, and union supporter who helped enact an ambitious Democratic agenda for his state, including sweeping protections for abortion rights and generous aid to families. Harris hopes to shore up her campaign's standing across the upper Midwest, a critical region in presidential politics that often serves as a buffer for Democrats seeking the White House. The party remains haunted by Donald Trump's wins in Michigan and Wisconsin in 2016. Trump lost those states in 2020, but has zeroed in on them as he aims to return to the presidency this year and is expanding his focus to Minnesota. That was from Associated Press. Governor Walz posted a biographical video today.
Sometimes life is as much about the lessons you learn as the lessons you teach. When I grew up, community was a way of life. My high school class was 24 people. I was related to half of them. I learned to be generous towards my neighbors, compromise without compromising my values, and work for the common good. My dad was in the Army, and with his encouragement, I joined the Army National Guard when I was 17. I served for 24 years. I used my GI benefits to go to college and become a public school teacher. I coached football and taught social studies for 20 years. And I tried to teach my students what small-town Nebraska taught me: respect, compromise, service to country. And so when I went into government, that's what I carried with me. I worked with Republicans to pass an infrastructure bill, cut taxes for working families, signed paid leave into law. I codified abortion rights after Roe got overturned. Because I go to work for the common good. But enough about me. Let's talk about you. Because that's what this election is about. It's about your future. It's about your family. And Vice President Harris knows that. She too grew up in a middle-class family. She too goes to work every day, making sure families can not just get by, but get ahead. We believe in the promise of America, in those values I learned in Nebraska, and we're ready to fight for them. Because as Kamala Harris says, when we fight, we win.
A video posted by Governor Tim Walz before he was governor. He was a U.S. congressman from Minnesota. The Harris campaign also put up a TikTok with Governor Walz speaking about the Republican vice presidential nominee, Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio.
People like J.D. Vance know nothing about small-town America. It's not about hate. It's not about collapsing in. The golden rule there is mind your own damn business. Their policies are what destroyed rural America. They've divided us.
And the end of the TikTok video has a series of images of Governor Walz in office with farm animals on a football field and in a helicopter. Former President Barack Obama releasing a statement. When a presidential candidate chooses a running mate, it says a lot about who they are and what kind of president they'll be. Do they pick someone inexperienced and polarizing who will deepen our divisions? Or do they pick someone with the judgment to make tough decisions and the character to believe that every voice counts and everyone deserves an equal chance? Tim's signature is his ability to talk like a human being and treat everyone with decency and respect. Not all that surprising considering the fact that he served in the National Guard for 24 years and worked as a high school social studies teacher and football coach before being elected to Congress. That was part of the statement from former President Barack Obama. And Donald Trump presidential campaign press secretary Caroline Leavitt putting out a statement. It's no surprise that San Francisco liberal Kamala Harris wants West Coast wannabe Tim Walz as her running mate. Walz has spent his governorship trying to reshape Minnesota in the image of the Golden State, while Walz pretends to support Americans in the heartland. When the cameras are off, he believes that rural America is mostly cows and rocks. From proposing his own carbon-free agenda to suggesting stricter emission standards for gas-powered cars and embracing policies to allow convicted felons to vote, Walz is obsessed with spreading California's dangerously liberal agenda far and wide. If Walz won't tell voters the truth, we will. Just like Kamala Harris, Tim Walz is a dangerously liberal extremist. And the Harris-Walz California dream is every American's nightmare. That was the statement from Caroline Leavitt, a press secretary for the Donald Trump presidential campaign. Senator J.D. Vance, the Republican vice presidential nominee, held a campaign rally in Philadelphia ahead of the Kamala Harris and Tim Walz rally scheduled to be in that city tonight. Senator Vance took some questions from reporters, including about the choice of Governor Walz and not Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro to be the Democratic vice presidential candidate.
Do you see him as an easier candidate?
Well, look, the only thing I'll say about Josh Shapiro is I genuinely, there's some fans out here, I genuinely feel bad that for days, maybe even weeks, the guy actually had to run away from his Jewish heritage because of what the Democrats are saying about him. I think that's scandalous and disgraceful. Whatever you believe or whatever disagreements on policy you have about somebody, the fact that that race, the vice presidential race on the Democratic side, became so focused on his ethnicity, I think is absolutely disgraceful, and it's insulting to Americans, whatever background you're from. But look, I'm not relieved or non-relieved about who Kamala Harris chose because, look, Kamala Harris is the problem. Kamala Harris was the border czar. Kamala Harris has had the policies that have caused so many people to needlessly suffer. We're going to run against Kamala Harris because she's the problem, and she's the one asking to be the people's president of the United States. Though I'd say she's not actually asking. She's given teleprompter speeches. She's given scripted remarks. She's not actually doing the bare minimum we should expect of a person who wants to be the people's president. Yeah.
The choice of Tim Walz, the argument that was made for him is that he will help Democrats in the Midwest with white working class voters, perhaps. Can you address that argument?
Look, I'm skeptical that whoever the VP nominee is, most people are voting at the top of the ticket. But here's the thing about Tim Walz. Look, Tim Walz is a guy who wants to take children away from their parents if the parents don't agree to do sex changes and the school wants to. That's crazy, right? A fundamental violation of parental rights. Tim Walz is a guy who wants to ship more and more American manufacturing jobs to China. He said it on camera in the name of the green energy scam. Well, if you care about the environment, and I certainly do, why are you going to ship American manufacturing jobs to the dirtiest economy in the world? Why wouldn't you keep them right here in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, in the places that really need it? This is a guy who, when rioters were burning down the biggest city in Minnesota, was actively cheering them on. You think the black business leaders in Minneapolis are grateful, the working class business leaders are grateful that Tim Walz allowed rioters to burn down their businesses? You think that people are grateful to have a guy who wants to ship manufacturing jobs off to China? There's no way the American people are going to buy it. It just doesn't make sense. And again, the biggest problem with the Tim Walz pick, it's not Tim Walz himself, it's what it says about Kamala Harris. That when given an opportunity, she will bend the knee to the most radical elements of her party. That's exactly what she did here. That's what she's going to keep on doing as president. That's why we got to elect Donald J. Trump, President of the United States. And I'll take just a couple more here, and then we got to hit the road. Thank you all.
Senator, do you think you have any similarities with Walz? And you're both from the Midwest, and you work in the...
Can you start that again?
Yeah, do you think you have any similarities? And you can talk about like common ground that you share with Walz.
Well, look, I mean, yeah, we're white guys from the Midwest. I guess there are similarities there. But what's different is the actual ideas about how best to serve people, white, black, or anything else, in the Midwest and everywhere else, right? I can't believe this is a guy who tries to claim that he stands for working people, and yet he wants to pursue energy policies that are going to ship everybody's job to China. In some ways, what Tim Walz represents is doubling down on failed 30 years of leadership in this country, where we don't make enough of our own stuff, we don't use enough of our own workers to make enough of our own stuff, we rely on everybody else for energy instead of American citizens, and then we throw open the southern border to make our communities less livable and less safe. He is the double down choice for failed leadership. And again, Kamala Harris selected him. I don't know why, but I think it's because she's fundamentally a radical herself and she wanted a partner in crime.
Senator J.D. Vance, Republican from Ohio, vice presidential nominee for the Republican Party, at a rally in Philadelphia. At the end of his scheduled remarks, he took some questions from reporters. The White House Senior Deputy Press Secretary Emily Simons putting out a statement. This morning, the president and vice president spoke on the phone ahead of her official announcement that she selected Governor Tim Walz as her vice presidential nominee. The president also spoke with Governor Walz to congratulate him on his selection. And this came up at today's White House briefing with the press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre.
Did President Biden have a favorite contender in the beef steaks, and did he express that to the vice president?
So here's what I'll say, and I want to point you to the president's statement, right, that he put out not too long after the vice president made her announcement. Going to be really mindful. We've got to follow the law here and can't comment on 2024, but just to say, like, what he did mention, he has known Governor Walz for 2 decades and worked with him when they both served in Congress, and then during the Biden-Harris administration in his capacity as governor of Minnesota. President Biden respects Governor Walz as a strong, principled, effective leader who fights for working people, someone who has never forgotten where he came from, growing up on a Midwestern farm. President Biden respects Governor Walz's life of service, serving in the Army National Guard for 24 years and becoming the highest-ranking enlisted soldier to serve in Congress, serving his community as a teacher, as a high school football coach, and serving as governor where Governor Walz lowered the cost of insulin to $35, has fought to protect women's fundamental rights, ended junk fees, and cut taxes for middle-class families. The president is grateful that they have been able to work together to get those important priorities done for more, obviously, for the American people more broadly. Look, if you're asking me if the vice president sought the president's advice, she did. And we have said this before, and I've said this many times, they are a strong team together. She's a critical partner to this president. She has been for the past 3.5 years, and they have discussions regularly of both domestic and international importance. And this situation is no different. And so he did offer up his advice, and I'll leave it there.
The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre at her news conference today. An article from CNN. For more than 40 years, Democrats have nominated presidential and vice presidential nominees who attended law school. That ended Tuesday when Vice President Kamala Harris selected Governor Tim Walz as her running mate. He is the first Democrat on a presidential ticket since 1980 to not have attended law school. He has a master's in educational leadership. And it was former President Jimmy Carter who was the last candidate who fit that bill. Second gentleman Doug Emhoff posted his own video today calling the wife of Governor Tim Walz, Gwen Walz.
Hello?
Gwen?
Yes?
It's Doug Emhoff. How are you?
Oh. Holy smokes.
Right. So,
yes, thank you for taking time to call. It's so considerate.
So Gwen, I remember getting this call 4 years ago, and I actually know what you're going through right now, but the good news is I've already been through it. So just like Dr. Biden was there for me, who had been through it, and I've been through it, I'm going to be there for you. And we're going to do this together.
Thank you.
And
Thank
Kamala
you.
and Tim are going to do this together, and we are going to win this election together. And I cannot wait to see you in Philadelphia in a little bit.
Well, we are so excited and thrilled and honored, and we are ready to win. And so we will do everything, that we can. And I'm so anxious to meet you and see you both and get going here. So thank you for the call. It means everything.
All right. Well, let's get to it. I can't wait, and we're gonna have a great time tonight. And we can do anything for 90 days, right?
I think we can.
All right.
We can. We'll see you soon.
I'll see you later, and I can't wait. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Second gentleman Doug Emhoff on the phone with Gwen Walz, wife of Governor Tim Walz, who's now been selected as the Democratic vice presidential running mate to the Democratic presidential nominee, Vice President Kamala Harris. That video posted by Doug Emhoff. And the reference to Philadelphia, the first rally in Philadelphia with the new ticket. This is Washington Today. From Associated Press, 5 secretaries of state are urging Elon Musk to fix an AI chatbot on the social media platform X, saying in a letter sent Monday that it has spread election misinformation. Top election officials from Michigan, Minnesota, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Washington told Musk that X's AI chatbot produced false information about state ballot deadlines shortly after President Joe Biden dropped out of the 2024 presidential race. That was from AP. The Pennsylvania Secretary of the Commonwealth, Al Schmidt, was a guest today on the Washington Post Live program about countering election disinformation. The moderator is Amy Gardner, Post Democracy reporter.
Yesterday, a letter came out from 5 secretaries of state, including you. It was sent to Elon Musk and published by the Washington Post. And you were asking or demanding that Mr. Musk, the owner of X, of course, that he immediately implement changes to X's AI chatbot known as Grok for what was described in the letter as disinformation that was spread on X by this AI chatbot. Most notably, it's shared with millions of users false information that Kamala Harris was not eligible to appear on the ballot this fall in 9 different states, including yours, where that was not accurate. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you expect from Elon Musk. Do you expect him to comply with this request? And if not, what further action do you think you might take, and what further recourse have you got?
Well, one thing that really prompted this was, as you mentioned, misinformation that was being shared, suggesting that after President Biden declined or withdrew from the race, or ended that campaign, that it was too late for another candidate to appear on the ballot, which is simply not true. In every state, there is still time for candidates to appear on the ballot. The Democratic convention hadn't even happened yet, so there was no official Democratic candidate yet, and all the rest. And what we saw was that people were being exposed to misinformation, and it really caught fire. So some other secretaries and Secretary Simon, who's the leader of the National Association of Secretaries of State, organized this letter to notify X and notify Mr. Musk of the damage that was being done, and that they would be better served by turning voters toward reliable sources of information. We've seen AI obviously evolve and mature over time,
Quickly,
and
yeah.
it has proven its effectiveness for spreading misinformation, but election information can never be inaccurate. You never want to tell the voter the wrong day. You never want to tell voters the wrong information, and that's exactly what we saw in this case.
Pennsylvania Secretary of the Commonwealth Al Schmidt on today's Washington Post Live event. Also on the program was the Arizona Secretary of State. The article, written by the moderator, Washington Post democracy reporter Amy Gardner, includes this paragraph. Elon Musk launched Grok last year as an anti-woke chatbot, professing to be frustrated by what he says is the liberal bias of ChatGPT, in contrast to AI tools built by OpenAI, Microsoft, and Google, which are trained to carefully navigate controversial topics. Musk said he wanted Grok to be unfiltered and, quote, answer spicy questions that are rejected by most other AI systems. From ABC News, a Pakistani national with purported ties to Iran was arrested last month on charges he plotted to assassinate former President Donald Trump and multiple other public officials, according to a criminal complaint unsealed Tuesday in Brooklyn federal court. While the criminal complaint does not mention Trump by name, multiple sources familiar with the case told ABC News one of the intended targets of the alleged plot was Trump. After spending time in Iran, Asif Merchant flew from Pakistan to the U.S. to recruit hitmen to carry out the alleged plot, according to a detention memo. The person he contacted was a confidential informant working with the FBI, according to the criminal complaint. Merchant, 46 years old, is charged with murder for hire. That reporting from ABC News. The acting Deputy Homeland Security Secretary, Christy Carnegallo, spoke today about the attempted assassination of former President Trump by the suspect, Matthew Crooks, and criticism of female Secret Service agents. She was at a program honoring the 25th anniversary of the nonprofit group Women in Federal Law Enforcement, or WIFL.
I want to acknowledge how challenging the last 3 weeks have been for the federal law enforcement community and for some of our team members in particular. The attempted assassination of former President Trump on July 13th put into stark relief your critical work as law enforcement officers and agents, safeguarding our leaders, safeguarding our rule of law, and safeguarding our institutions. There are important lessons that must and will be learned from that day, and we'll use that knowledge to strengthen what is already the world's premier protection force and make it even better. At the same time, I'm incredibly proud of what the men and women of the United States Secret Service did in Pennsylvania that day, and what they and what many of you do every single day to ensure the safety and security of their protectees. The same is true of law enforcement agents and officers across our department and across the federal government, like the U.S. Marshals, and of our state and local partners. Each of you train and work smart and hard. You are dedicated, brave, and skilled. You put your lives on the line to keep our country safe. In the weeks since, I know that many of us have read and seen commentary disparaging the role of women in law enforcement generally and in the United States Secret Service specifically. And let me just be plain. That way of thinking is baseless, it's insulting, and it's dangerous. Secretary of Homeland Security Mayorkas and I were proud to say as much in a joint public statement that we issued in the days following the shooting, alongside the leaders of every single DHS agency and office with law enforcement responsibility. And in that statement, we reiterated our commitment to continue to recruit, to retain, and to elevate women in our law enforcement ranks. And I know that belief is universally shared by leaders across the US government. No matter where you serve, no matter how you serve, we have your backs.
Christy Carnegallo, Acting Deputy Homeland Security Secretary at the 25th anniversary of the nonprofit group Women in Federal Law Enforcement, or WIFL, was held in Alexandria, Virginia. Also taking part in the program, the Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco and the FBI Director Christopher Wray. Story from CBS News. The day after the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, the internet saw a huge spike in calls for violence, and in particular, an increase in calls for a modern-day civil war. A chilling reflection of a small group of users who created and amplified messages glorifying mass shooters and perpetrators of targeted violence. The spike was documented by Moonshot, a company that monitors domestic violent extremism, or DVE, spaces online. That from CBS News. Washington Today continues in a moment.
We need your help to reach our $25,000 summer fundraising goal. A generous donor will match every dollar you give, doubling your impact. I'm Paul at C-SPAN, and your support keeps the unfiltered access you rely on, allowing you to think for yourself. Donate now at cspan.org/donate and make twice the difference. Every amount helps. Thank you for your support. Double your donation at cspan.org/donate.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. From Market Watch, U.S. stocks finished higher on Tuesday, clawing back some losses from their worst day in nearly 2 years as investors took a pause from concerns that the U.S. economy could be heading toward a recession. And the Dow was up 294, NASDAQ up 166, S&P up 53. The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre got reporters' questions about the economy at her news conference today.
Turning to the economy in light of the July jobs report, Claudia Sam said that she doesn't think that the country is in a recession right now, but we're getting uncomfortably close to that situation. Does the president, his team, agree with that, and what are they doing to prevent that from
So
happening?
here's what I'll say, and just a couple of things at the top here. While we've seen some volatility, we admit that, we have seen that, our broader economy remains resilient. And we see that because of the data, obviously, that's been coming out over the past, not just couple of months, but the past couple of years. And what we have seen recently is consumers remain resilient and business investment remains strong. Unemployment, while up from 50-year lows, is still low at 4.3%. And that's important. You think about inflation, it's down by 2.5%, and the stock market is more than 35% under this administration. Is up more, than 35% under this administration. And so what we're going to focus on, we're going to focus on the middle class, we're going to focus on working families, we're going to focus on continuing to lower costs, whether it's prescription drugs, building homes that are affordable for folks, and taking on price gouging. It's very different than what the other side, Republicans, want to do. They want to give tax breaks to billionaires, corporations. That's what we continue to see them talk about, wanting to do. And let's not forget, they want to make sure that cut Social Security and Medicare. That is what they've been saying that they're going to do. We are going to, the economic team is going to continue to monitor the situation, but we believe that the economy remains resilient, and that's what's going to be our focus.
The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre at her news conference in the White House briefing room. C-SPAN spoke this morning with Mark Zandi, Moodys Analytics chief economist, about the state of the economy.
Since the announcement of the July numbers, a lot of focus not only on those numbers, but what it suggests about the economy writ large. How would you compare those things?
Well, you're referring to the jobs numbers that were released last Friday for the month of July. They were on the soft side compared to expectations, but I think abstracting from the vagaries of the data, lots of go on month to month. Like in the month of July, we had a hurricane Beryl that affected economic activity. Abstracting from all of that, underlying job growth is about 150,000 per month, which is pretty good. That's consistent with an economy that continues to perform well. Clearly, the economy is throttling back. It's slowing. A big part of that's by design. The Federal Reserve has pushed up interest rates and kept them high in an effort to cool things off, slow down growth, get inflation back in the bottle. But despite the slowdown, I think, the economy continues to perform reasonably well.
Do you share concerns? I guess I've read over the last couple of days, not only taking a look at this picture, but also associating it with the possibility of a recession, even though that word was bandied about and then not so much. But where do you think that stands about as a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, recession risks are still elevated. They're high. As long as the Federal Reserve keeps its foot on the brakes, keep interest rates as high as they are. The federal funds rate target, that's the rate the Fed controls, was 5.5%. That's pretty high by any standard. And, when the Fed's doing that, that suggests recession is a real possibility. But I'd say the odds of recession happening anytime, let's say in the next year, are less than even, much less than even. So, elevated risks, clearly the Fed needs to start cutting interest rates here, but barring, something that is completely unforeseen, I think we should be able to avoid an economic downturn.
If you compare it to economic conditions that lead to a recession, what do you see happening now versus at times when the country went into recession?
Well, the biggest difference between now and then is layoffs. Businesses, they're not hiring as aggressively as they were, thus the slowdown in job creation. They've cut back hours that people are working in an effort to, meet, kind of right-size their labor force with the demand for their goods and services. But they, up to this point in time, have not laid off workers in any significant way. There's some evidence that maybe there's been a bit of a pickup, but so far not a big deal. And, I think lots of layoffs is a necessary condition for recession, because once you get layoffs, then that spooks people. And as consumers, they start to pull back, they spend less. Businesses see that, they pull back even more, lay off even more workers, and you get into this kind of self-reinforcing, vicious negative cycle. That's a recession, but a necessary condition for that are more layoffs, and we haven't seen that yet.
Mark Zandi, Moodys Analytics chief economist, on C-SPAN's Washington Journal morning program. Story from Fox Business: Americans are increasingly turning to their credit cards to cover everyday expenses, with debt hitting a new record high at the end of June. According to a New York Federal Reserve report published Tuesday, in the 3-month period from April to June, total credit card debt rose to $1.14 trillion, an increase of $27 billion, or about 1% from the previous quarter, according to the report. Marks the highest level on record in Fed data dating back to 2003. Tropical Storm Debby is moving slowly up the Atlantic seaboard, and the forecast from the National Hurricane Center is catastrophic flooding possible across southeast Georgia and eastern South Carolina leading up to Friday. Possibly 10 to 20 inches of rain, and then heavy rainfall in northern North Carolina, portions of mid-Atlantic states, and southern New England through Saturday. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster, Republican, held a news conference this afternoon in the capital city of Columbia.
This is a storm that we have not seen before. There's parts of it have not been as bad as we thought, although they've been bad, but there are some parts coming that likely will be worse than what we have seen before, and in some different areas. I'm glad to report that thus far, we have not had any reports of any fatalities. We hope that it stays like that, and we want to urge people again to be safe. Think about what you're doing. Don't take any chances. And remember, this water can be very dangerous, particularly when it's moving. The threat of severe flooding across the state remains very high, and we'll get into that with some details in a few seconds. Heavy rainfall has already hit several parts of our state, especially the low country. And what we have happening is this storm is coming up. It's moving very slowly. It's got a lot of rain in it, and it is going out over the ocean and gathering some strength and coming back in. The winds have not been hurricane strength yet. They're somewhere maybe between 35 and 55 miles an hour, something at their height, I think, if I'm right on that. But the water is going to be very heavy, particularly in the northern part of the state, from Myrtle Beach all the way up the line along North Carolina, all the way up to where you remember we had in 2018, that was Hurricane Florence, and where we had the overflow in Conway, and we had to put the aqua dams on Highway 501 and all that, and we've never seen that kind of water there. We're likely to see it again there as well as in the other areas around that part of the state. And also, you remember Joaquin in 2015. It wasn't a hurricane, but it was a flood. That came right here through the Midlands. We're likely to see that again. And you remember we had a number of dams breaking. We had water that was over the roads around Forest Acres. Cars were on the bridges there going across Gills Creek and being covered with water. And it comes up fast and it moves fast. So we're likely to have both of those areas having that kind of activity this time. Maybe not, maybe we will. But we were preparing for that kind of heavy rainfall and the danger that comes with that kind of flooding. We're confident there's going to be flooding. We're confident there's going to be a lot of rain. The only question is how much is it going to be?
South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster at a news conference in Columbia, South Carolina this afternoon. Story from USA Today, the tropics are heating up just as Debby continues to pound the southeast with rain and wind. Forecasters are also keeping an eye on another developing tropical system that's moving across the Caribbean Sea Tuesday. And from Reuters, Boeing said on Tuesday it plans to make design changes to prevent a future mid-air cabin panel blowout like the one in an Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9 flight in January that spun the plane maker into its second major crisis in recent years. Boeing's Senior Vice President for Quality, Elizabeth Lund, said the plane maker is working on design changes that it hopes to implement within the year and then to retrofit across the fleet. Investigators have said the plug in the new Alaska MAX 9 was missing 4 key bolts. It started today a 2-day National Transportation Safety Board investigative hearing in Washington. Chair Jennifer Homendy spoke at the start about what the board expects to accomplish.
This hearing is an important part of our ongoing investigation of the accident that occurred on January 5th, 2024 in Portland, Oregon. Investigative hearings are fact-finding proceedings. The purpose is to receive testimony and evidence which may be of aid in determining the cause of an accident. At about 5:14 p.m. Pacific time, a Boeing 737 MAX 9 operating as Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 returned to Portland International Airport after the left mid-exit door plug departed the airplane in flight, leading to a rapid decompression. The airplane landed on runway 28 left at Portland International Airport without further incident, and all occupants, 2 flight crew members, 4 cabin crew members, and 171 passengers deplaned at the gate. 7 passengers and 1 flight attendant received minor physical injuries. I say physical injuries because this was quite traumatic for the crew and the passengers. And injuries we can't see, which we often don't talk about, can have profound, lasting impacts on lives and livelihoods. So on behalf of the entire agency, we are so sorry for all that you experienced during this very traumatic event. For those in the room, Elias Quintanas from our Transportation Disaster Assistance Division is here to provide support to anyone who may need it, and I believe he's at the back of the, oh, Elias is right there. Can you raise your hand? Stand up. Great, thank you. This hearing will consist of 4 panels. Overview of Boeing 737 MAX 9 manufacturing and inspections, events surrounding the opening and closing of the mid-exit door plug, safety management systems and quality management systems, and Federal Aviation Administration oversight. These topics were identified at a pre-hearing conference with the technical panel, parties to the hearing, and the Board of Inquiry, which we hosted last week on August 1st, 2024. As a reminder, if anyone has information they would like to share with the board, whether you're here or not here, or the investigative team, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at witness@ntsb.gov. Again, witness@ntsb.gov at any time. You may also email me at chair@ntsb.gov, and I will share that information with the investigative team for follow-up.
Chair Jennifer Homendy at the start of the public hearings today in Washington on the Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9 door plug blowout. Washington Post article about The investigation reads that newly released transcripts of interviews with Boeing employees describe a chaotic push to finish building the 737 MAX that suffered a mid-air blowout in January. Months after the incident, the National Transportation Safety Board has not fully untangled key moments in the plane's journey through the factory outside Seattle last September, saying it has been unable to determine who opened or reclosed the panel that flew off the airliner. But the transcripts released Tuesday show that Boeing had reminded employees about the need to document removals in July 2023, saying in red underlined type that removing or loosening parts had to be recorded. According to the transcripts released Tuesday, some workers described pressure from their bosses to move aircraft through the production line. A manager responsible for the final manufacturing stages said a problem with the panel led him to receiving a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails. That was from the Washington Post. Here is more from today's hearing. NTSB member J. Todd Inman questioning Boeing Senior Vice President for Quality, Elizabeth Lund.
Talking here about how at Line 8 it changed quite a bit. He wanted to comment that before he took over from 2015 to 2017, a couple of ex-Toyota managers that were brought in to try to build the airplanes the way Toyota builds cars. I think that's that lean manufacturing discussion. And if you'll drop on down, please. They were not successful. And then he goes on to talk about we embarked on a significant program to get them to put inspections back in, and we did that through compliance and legal enforcement. They complied with all that, but slowly, very slowly, did they reintroduce quality inspections. And that didn't really change. We'll go to 605. Until the MAX accidents, where it brought a lot of things. But I think the big quote out of that, you need a lot of leverage to get Boeing to change. And then when Boeing changes, it's very slow. And it took a long time for them to really understand that their quality system needed to improve. I guess my question is, Ms. Lund, is this a cycle that we're going to see every 2 or 3 years or every 4 years to where we have to come back and look at a different thing? I'm not trying to put you on the spot with that, but it seems to be a recurring trend.
Member Inman, I feel like that's a fair question. We are committed that this will not be a recurring trend. I'll clarify just a couple of thoughts. We have been on a lean manufacturing journey for quite a while in Boeing. And in fact, the 737 program, more than 5 years ago, 7, 8, 9 years ago, really was our leader in lean manufacturing in the company. And at that time, there was really good performance. Our quality numbers, our quality defects were down. Our supplier shortages were down. By the metrics we talked about earlier, you would have seen really some pretty robust performance. We got away from that over time. So as it mentions the 2 executives that were brought in, they did work on several initiatives, but I just wanted to counter that lean has been with Boeing for a while. We really do believe in lean. One of the premises of lean that we really believe with is the number one way to improve lean is to improve quality. Those two are integral, and we believe in that. So I'll just wanted to clarify that. In terms of having to see this again, we are committed that you won't. Administrator Whitaker has asked us many times, what is our sustainment plan? How can he and his team, many of whom are located here today, be sure that this won't be overturned in a few years, that these things won't be taken away? And for each aspect of the changes and improvements we're trying to make, we have given some metrics and a sustainment process. And as I mentioned earlier, part of the basis of it will be command media. The FAA will have approval authority of that command media. That's one of the elements. The SMS system is one of the elements. It's becoming required, as I'm sure the committee understands, in the future, but we're doing it voluntarily already. Use of that for the changes of our processes will be another method. So we are continuing to work on these areas that will give confidence both to us but to all of you and the FAA as well that these changes will stick.
Can I make one suggestion?
Sure, please.
Stop talking about leaner and quality and start talking about safer manufacturing.
Agree.
Testifying Elizabeth Lund, Boeing Senior Vice President for Quality, asking the questions. A member of the National Transportation Safety Board, J. Todd Inman, at today's NTSB public hearing on the Alaska Airlines 737 MAX door plug blowout earlier this year, day one of 2 days of scheduled hearings. Secretary of State Antony Blinken had a little fun at Australia's expense today, as he and the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin hosted their Australian counterparts at the annual U.S.-Australia ministerial meeting held at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. The Secretary rubbing it in that the U.S. Summer Olympics swimming teams won 28 medals, 8 gold, versus Australia's 18 medals and 7 gold.
It's a great pleasure, both professional and personal, to welcome Benny, welcome Richard, to welcome the entire team here for Osman. I think we don't need much proof, but here's more evidence of it, that the United States and Australia get along swimmingly. We've seen that in Paris. We see that again here today. Yeah.
Should be close to press.
But we swim together, and here we are.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter Word for Word and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.